Thank you. Hello. I'm Denny. I'm a principal UX designer over at Experticity. I've been there for about 1.5 years or so. Before that, I was at backcountry.com for 3 years. I moved out here from Portland, Oregon for that job. I've been a UX designer for over a decade now.
My name is Joey. I am a product manager at Experticity. Prior to that, I was at Backcountry for about 8 years, where I worked on corporate strategy, operations, and M&A. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about design sprints. For those of you who don't know what they are, we're going to give a brief overview of what they are, why they're worth doing, some lessons that Denny and I have learned as conducting a few of these at Experticity, and then some principles and tools we've taken from the design sprints that we've used in other processes to answer other big questions.
Yeah. But to start off, like, who here knows what a design sprint is? Everyone? Okay. Who's read the book? Okay. Okay. Who has actually participated in one? Okay. Okay, cool. Great. So to start off, we're just going to briefly go over what a design sprint is, just so everyone's kind of on the same page. So a design sprint is this process created by a couple people at Google Ventures with the intent of being able to kind of test out big ideas very quickly. Okay, so it's a process that takes course over a week, and it's a very kind of structured week. Okay, Monday, you bring different stakeholders in from around the business. You create a kind of map of the different actors that kind of play a role within the system that you're working on. You set a goal, and you define a specific question that you're going to answer for the week. Tuesday, there's a lot of sketching and exploration. You're kind of looking at different sites for inspiration and that sort of thing. Wednesday, you plan what you're going to build and test. Thursday, you build a prototype. So you have 1 day to build a prototype, and then Friday, you get that prototype in front of users and you test it out. So it's a very quick, intense week. But it's great at a great way to test out kind of big ideas and hypotheses and that sort of thing. To start with, we're going to tell you the story about how our first design sprint was born. So we worked together on the acquisition and qualifications team at Experticity. At the time when we decided to do our first design sprint, this was back in about November of last year. Joey had been on the team for about 6 months. Before that, the team had gone through a little bit of turnover, and we're struggling a little bit to just kind of work well. But by the time we decided to do this, the team was gelling pretty well at that point. We had both read the book and were excited about the idea of a design sprint, but hadn't talked to anyone who'd actually done one before. And then in November, we had to redesign the profile on Experticity. Now, for those of you that are not super familiar with Experticity, Experticity is a platform that connects people like Kwong Wu. We have over 1 million of these members. Okay, and Kwong Wu, this is a guy that travels the world. He takes amazing photographs. He has outstanding adventures. If you look at his avatar down here in the lower left corner, you can see him sitting next to what looks like about a 15-foot snake. So he is an expert adventurer. Okay, we call him an expert in hike and camp and travel. And people like Steve Harrell, who's super into biking and running and paddling. You can see he's really proud of his bike, and we call him an expert in those activities. Okay, so we have over 1 million of these experts on our platform, and we connect them with brands who make products related to their activities, and help get those products into their hands and kind of reward them and provide them different benefits. So, and at the time when we started this, profiles on Experticity looked like this. This is a screenshot of my profile. So, there's different things going on here. The navigation was a little bit, kind of funky, and the information that was being presented on there, it wasn't clear always what it was or why it was there. And we knew that this wasn't what we wanted. And there were a lot of opinions around the company about what it should be and what it should do, and actually who it was for, who was intended to be consumed by, and that sort of thing. And the opinions, there's a lot of strong opinions from, different departments throughout the company, all the way up to the CEO, had some very specific ideas about what he thought, should be on the profile. And so we knew this was going to be a really fun project. But we also knew there was going to be a lot of wrangling involved, and, trying to get alignment on, exactly what we were trying to do with the profile. And so we thought this seems like a great project to try out a design sprint. Thankfully, Jeremy, who's the head of product, sitting over there in the corner, he's super supportive of research and other kind of efforts to help drive innovation at Experticity. So he was supportive of the idea. There was, a lot of different sort of opinions about, like, is this like the right process? It's a big investment, and so there's, a little bit of a concern about, like, how many people we were going to be involving and how much time we were taking away from actually delivering features and that sort of thing. Thoughts about, like, how we should approach, the ownership of this page and that sort of thing. So, but we managed to get agreement that we could do this, and we were off to the races. So we started scheduling people to come in on that first day, Monday, where what you try and do is you gather different perspectives from important, like, people from around the business. So another thing that we did is we thought we could trim it down to 4 days. We looked at all the different steps within the process, and we thought, what, like, some of these steps seem like good, but we're not sure what value we're going to get out of this, and we do want to kind of, like, mitigate, how much time we spend, trying this out for the first time. And so we thought we were going to cut out a couple of the steps within the process. So we were trimming it down to 4 days instead of 5. We involved people. We had a team of 4 for the first design sprint. We had Joey and I, and then 2 engineers from our team. There was a front-end engineer and our lead engineer, who's kind of a full-stack developer. The lead engineer, we knew that he was going to have different meetings that he had to kind of go in and out of throughout the week. But we figured, kind of between the 2 engineers, we'd always have kind of an engineering voice in the room. And during the most critical times, we'd make sure to kind of, schedule around those meetings. And we were off to the races. We got people in that first day. We created a diagram, or kind of a map of the system. It was super valuable and really interesting to sort of hear from all the different groups within the company. Tuesday we sketched. Wednesday we actually ended up picking the sketch from our front-end engineer as sort of the big idea that we were going to test. Thursday we built it out, and were able to get it tested. So in the end, it was actually a super valuable process. We asked, like, Monday, you sort of define, like, the main question that you're going to answer. We answered that question very clearly, we felt, during the week. We learned a lot in the process, and we felt like, gosh, that was so successful. Like, this is something that we should incorporate into our process more regularly.
So like Denny just talked about, it's a lot of work, and it's a big investment. We were talking about involving engineers, designers, and product folks, and sometimes executives for a whole week of time, locking them in a room. That's an expensive week. Like you said, we tried to shorten it. I think that's kind of a result of us being a little bit nervous doing the first one. But why it's worth it. So like Denny said, I've been on the team about 6 months. We were gelling pretty well, but still felt a little bit like an outsider. This really being locked in a room, trying to solve a big problem with a group of people, really kind of, it creates a bond. So I think, after the design sprint, the team is really kind of gelled a lot better. Even people on the team that weren't involved in the design sprint, we left all the assets up and they came in and we talked through it. It really helped kind of bring the team together. Collective scrutiny, this is my favorite, because I think, I've never had an idea that wasn't made better by bringing in 5 or, a few other people to talk about it. And it really creates this atmosphere where it's okay to scrutinize someone else's idea. It's actually encouraged. Quick decision making. So the profile, like Denny said, a lot of folks had strong opinions about this. The CEO to our chief product officer to the people in customer service wanted their experience to become real in the profile, and that kind of makes it hard to move forward with one path because you're going to make some people angry, some people happy, and some people won't care at all. So the quick decision making is important. You just have to make a decision to move forward because of the time constraints. User input in forming a big decision. This was really, as a product manager, like you're kind of nervous. You don't want to commit all this engineering and resources to a problem that you're not sure exists or this is the right solution. This really helps, getting it in front of users helps inform, either validates your ideas that yes, this is the right thing that engineering should be working on, or we totally blew it and I'm glad we didn't spend 4 months, 5 months working on that. It builds trust with stakeholders. So like I said, there's anyone in product, engineering, and design, if you get a stakeholder, if you give those 3 people in front of a stakeholder, they want to tell you everything, every idea they've got. And this really helps kind of let them be heard in a meaningful way. Valuable insights even when you fail. So the first one, Denny said, it was a big success. It was awesome. We're still developing the stuff we worked through in the design to sprint today, 8 months later, and it's looking great. The second one did not go very well, and we failed to answer the question pretty miserably, which we'll get into later. But we learned a lot about stuff we cared about. So even though we failed to answer the question, the stakeholders learned a lot, we learned a lot, design and engineering learned a lot. So in the end, it was worth it.
Yeah, so we've run through 3 design sprints at this point, and there's a few lessons that we've kind of learned along the way as we've gone through these, and they're really important lessons, and we're going to run you guys through them right now. So the first one, don't trim the middle. Okay, so I mentioned that that first sprint we tried, we thought we could remove steps within the process. Well, we got into it, and we thought we were going to take 4 days. We ended up taking 5 days. It turns out we were getting a lot of value out of every step along the way, and we didn't really want to trim things down. We felt good after kind of the first day to go ahead and invest a little bit more in the process, and each step really kind of builds on the previous one, and so it's important to kind of go through all of the, kind of different steps within the process.
So Denny mentioned earlier the diagram. So the diagram you're going to draw has all the actors in the system and then the system itself and how they move through it. It's really important to do your homework ahead of time and get this diagram drawn up because it keeps the conversation with all the interviews, the stakeholders, really grounded. Like I said before, when you get, head of sales, the CEO, 4 other people in the room in front of an audience of designers, developers, and product people, they have this big idea they've been wanting to tell you about all this time, or they have a bunch of ideas. And this diagram is really important to keep the conversation grounded in the problem you're trying to solve. So do your homework ahead of time, sketch the drawing out. We spent, I think, a half a day before we scheduled the interviews, before interview day, building the diagram to guide the conversation.
Okay, so one of the design sprints that we ran, we did a great job at picking a question that was really important to the company, and we stayed focused on that question. However, the question that we picked was a question that the company could literally spend years trying to answer, okay? So when you're picking your question, keep in mind, try and find a question that is focused and specific enough that you could actually answer the question in a week. Now, that said, we got great insights that were related to the question, but we did not answer our question. So don't choose too big of a question to try and answer in your design sprint.
So stay focused on the main question. So once you pick that question, the first and the second design sprint, I think there's a decision maker in the room. As the product person, I was making the decision on things when people would start to argue and there'd be brainstorming. Ultimately, we need to move forward because we only have a week. So I'd make a decision to move forward with a certain idea. A quick story here. It's a horror story for me. Our second design sprint, we had the question written up there, and we were very focused on it for the first 3 days. And then on Wednesday, when we were going over different designs and how we were going to build the prototype, we came across this shiny new big problem. It wasn't new, we knew it was a problem, but it was definitely like exciting to be able to solve. So we started spitballing ideas, brainstorming, and when the idea dust had settled, everyone was so excited about this new thing we had talked about. It was hard to steer the conversation back to the actual question. So I have this very vivid memory sitting against the whiteboard, and everyone's looking at me, and I point to put this other idea in front of the prototype that that was meant to test the main idea. That 2 minutes into the first testing session on Friday, I knew that I had made a huge mistake because the user had no idea what it was just a bomb. It just totally bombed. So as the decider or the product person in the room, like, write that question on the whiteboard, on your hand, on Post-its, just keep it all around. Because we did really well the first couple of days, pointing to the question and saying, all right, we're talking about stuff that has nothing to do with answering this question. My back was to the whiteboard. I made the wrong decision. And I think that's why our second sprint didn't go as well as the first. So focus is important.
So that first day, you're inviting people from kind of different areas of the country who have kind of unique and important points of view to kind of contribute to the thinking. And it's actually really hard to pick the people that you want to invite, especially at once you're at a company, it's not like a small little startup. There's a lot of people within the company, and you have to sort of figure out, okay, well, is it this person who has the best point of view, or would it be that person? And structurally, like, Joey kind of reports to like a product group manager, who reports to the head of product, who reports to the chief product and technology officer, who reports to the CEO. And those are all like really important, voices that you want to hear. But there's definitely kind of a point of like diminishing returns, and in terms of the number of people that you talk to, and it can be really hard to pick, like, okay, should we talk to this person or that person? But do be diligent. Don't get sucked into the trap of inviting too many people. Our second sprint, we had 10 people that we interviewed, and we had definitely hit that point of diminishing returns. Not only do you like kind of hear the same things, from different people, but it's a long and it's an intense day. And after you talk to like 5 to 7 people, your ability to just really absorb the things that people are talking about and think critically starts going downhill pretty quick. And so even though we talked to a lot of people, and they did have important things to say and important perspectives to add to the mix, we really had reached that point of diminishing returns. So when you're scheduling the interviews, don't try and stay focused. Keep it a tight-knit group. Make the tough decisions about, to invite this person and not that person, to make sure that you have the time to get through the things that you need to get through that day, and you're able to sort of get as much value out of the time that you spend as possible.
So we've talked about that diagram a few times now, and we want to reinforce how important it is to document the diagram, chisel it in stone, get it tattooed on you, something, because our first design sprint, and maybe it was our best diagram, our user mapping experience, and we can't share it with you today because we erased it from the whiteboard. We're still developing, like, the design sprint was successful. We're developing the profile. 8 months later, it would be awesome to go back and run through the diagram again and all the actors, and keep revalidating your idea. We still think we're on the right track. The development's going great, but it would be nice to have that now. So as Denny mentioned, the interview, so that diagram you start out with that you're going to be super proud of on Monday morning and think you've nailed it is going to change all day long as you start to interview people with different points of view. For example, chief revenue officer, head of sales. Denny and I don't have a lot of interaction with the clients. We do the member-facing stuff. Had a lot of really interesting points of view that changed our diagram a lot. So the one we thought we had nailed at the beginning of the day was totally different than the one we had at the end of the day. And in fact, after about 5 interviews, we thought we were in a pretty good spot. The last 4 interviews changed the diagram dramatically. Like, it was totally different than what we had at the beginning or even in the middle. We should have taken pictures at each stage as we went through it. We didn't, so we had to kind of rework it back. So, based on the feedback we'd received, rework it back to what we thought was right. So document as you iterate through the diagram as well.
Yeah, and at the end, where we had ended up, we weren't sure after reflecting on it if that was, really the best version, and that maybe it was a couple versions back. But again, we hadn't documented each version. So the team is going to be nervous. People get nervous about sketching, although anyone can draw rectangles and lines and write words. So we haven't had any issues there. People are going to be nervous about not delivering, work during the week. But there's a lot of value that we get out of having the people in there, and we feel it's actually made the team a lot more efficient and effective afterward. And people are going to be nervous about building a prototype in a day. And the engineers that we work with are awesome, right? Ahead of time, they're like, oh, yeah, it should be fine. But after reflecting back, I think most of the engineers that we've involved in the design sprints have sort of fessed up, like, yeah, I was a little bit nervous about getting that prototype done in a day, but we did it. People are going to be nervous even if they say they're not. A few things that we, have done to, set us up for success, especially on that building the prototype day. On Wednesday, when we're kind of going through and defining the prototype that we're building, we make sure and talk about, okay, these aspects of it are critical. Like, we have to have these ones in order to answer the question. This would be really nice to have, but it'll come after we get the other stuff done. And in the end, we've always been able to include some of those nice to haves, but haven't gotten to all of them. Also, make sure to have the whole team there and ready to participate on Thursday. Obviously, the engineers are working all day trying to get a prototype built, put together. Designers as well. We use a lot of, we fake as much as we can within the prototype. So as a designer, one thing that I am working on all day is sort of designing out the pieces of the interface and doing a lot of production work on that, because we'll just export images out of Sketch, and then the engineers will just kind of put those as the element within the interface. And there's a lot of that sort of production work going on. You'll be, gathering copy, having to write copy. Either someone on the team is going to have to write it, or they're going to have to go and, work with a copywriter to try and get that. And gathering image assets is also that's always takes way more time than you think it's going to. And having people there and ready to help out and also answer questions along the way, because you come up to points as you're building where it's like, okay, well, we have kind of a little bit of a decision to make here. It's not quite, we either didn't think this through or it's not working out the way we thought it would. So just make sure and have the whole team there and ready to participate that whole day. Now, every sprint we have, towards the end, there have been certain people that, okay, it's just kind of all in the engineers' hands now. So, people have had time to go off and do other things, but I would plan to have the whole team there and available the whole day.
So on Friday, we hosted, the way we had set up the testing, Denny was upstairs with the users, and we were broadcasting the live testing sessions down in our team room. So I invited stakeholders from all around the organization. The design sprint team was in there to watch the users go through it. And it's really fun because you're sitting in there and there's people rooting for their feature that they just know the user's going to love and absolutely totally get it. And then to watch it bomb or to them actually get it is just awesome. So for example, we had our Chief Revenue Officer, John Ray, very strong personality and has a lot of great ideas, and has strong opinions about what the product should look like and be. And to have him in there watching users go through what he thought was absolutely it, the experience. And then to get some things and not was really awesome. He was smiling the whole time. He was writing notes. He had his fingers crossed at one point that they would get it. They didn't. And it was great. So this is a good, to end the week on a high note after a lot of work. It's a fun thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And finally, keep the artifacts up. So during the course of the sprint, you're creating a lot of artifacts, and you're sort of putting them up on the wall so that you can have them there to spark ideas and jog your memory and that sort of thing. And what we found is, there's a lot of like great ideas that are generated during that week, and not only like really only a fraction of them are included in sort of the end test. But that doesn't mean that there's not still like important and valuable ideas. And so what we like to do is leave our notes and our sketches and everything up for 2 or 3 weeks. It also allows us to kind of run the team through, some of the other thinking that didn't come through in the test, and just continue to kind of reflect and be reminded of some of the ideas. So. All right, so those are our 10 important lessons summarized here for you, but that's not all.
So now we're going to talk about, Denny and I were asked to answer another pretty big question for Experticity. It wasn't as design focused. It was more about this backend system that would power a really interesting user experience, but we didn't think the design sprint was the right tool to answer that question. So we sat down for a half a day and made the plan for the plan. So we took the stuff we knew was good from the design sprint and the stuff that helped us make a fast decision there, and built our own little mini, we called it a decision sprint, to get to a decision quickly. So again, in this situation, the people had tossed around ideas for years trying to figure out how the right way to solve this problem in Experticity. So that means a ton of people, all the way up to the CEO, especially the CEO, had extremely strong opinions about what it should be, how it should work, how quickly we should develop it, all these different things. So what we did was we sat down and made a plan that we would spend, us and one full stack engineer would spend basically a full week thinking about this, but we'd only tie up about 6 hours of stakeholder time throughout the whole week. So the first day, we did our homework. We made the diagram, set out our principles for what we wanted this to do, wrote out our goal for what we believe was the right thing. We spent probably a half a day or a day doing that. And then day one of this process was a 2-hour meeting where the first hour we presented the goal. And the goal of the meeting was to align on the goal and gather ideas from stakeholders. So it was like a group interview / do you all agree that this is where we should point our resources? First hour was doing that. Second hour was mini interviews. So everyone got 3 to 5 minutes to talk about what they thought the system should be or how it should look, how it should work. And Denny and I went back to the drawing board a full work day on Tuesday and reworked the goal because we couldn't align on the goal the first day, reworked the principles a little bit, and then tweaked our diagram. So we spent a whole day doing that. At the end of the day on Wednesday, so the third day in, there was an hour meeting with all the stakeholders again, because one of the principles we really liked was collective scrutiny. Get everyone in a room, quickly scrutinize the idea, iterate on it, and move on. So we did that, got everyone in a room for an hour, went back to the drawing board again for another half day, almost a full day, met up again for another hour on Thursday, collectively scrutinized the system we had designed, and then went back to the drawing board Friday morning, and we were getting ready for, Friday was decision day. So you guys have designed something we're going to move forward with, or no, this isn't it, was the final meeting on Friday. And we actually ended up getting really far in designing the system and the process, far enough so that we've been developing it for a little while now. And it's just, the clarity we got out of the whole process was great. And we got all these different points of view that have been arguing about this for so long. We're finally aligned on, okay, these guys are going to build that. We all agree that that's probably the right thing. So it was really gratifying, and we used the tools we learned in the design sprint to do that, to make the process. And we weren't sure it was going to work, but it worked. And it was actually just 2 days ago, someone else in the company that participated in it asked if we had a template for this so that they could do a similar thing. They weren't sure a design sprint was right, but the mini sprint seemed to be the right thing to do.
So as we were designing this new process, based on inspiration, from the design sprint and some other things we participated in, we came up with 6 principles for a fast and effective process. The design sprint isn't the right process for everything, but these are some principles to help guide the creation of some sort of a new process, that may be appropriate for whatever it is that you're working on. So clear ownership and autonomy. one thing that the design sprint really focuses on is you define a decision maker, and that person, if you get to a point where there's debate and it's unclear about what the path forward is, you turn to the decision maker and say, hey, it's time to make a decision so we can move on. And that's a super valuable tool. You have to have someone defined as a decision maker, and that person has to have the autonomy to be able to make the decisions, to be able to move the process forward. So that's a really key element to any kind of quick and effective process. Surfacing unique ideas or important ideas from unique perspectives. Another thing that the design sprint is really good at, that first day, they really focus on, it's not just stakeholders, but different people throughout the company who have an important and unique point of view, so that you understand the problem from a lot of different angles. And so ensuring that you're involving people with different unique points of view is another element of a fast and effective process. Getting concrete quick. When you're talking about abstract concepts and ideas, what often happens is people are saying the same words, but they have a different picture in their head about what that means, right? In a design sprint, day 2, you're sketching. You sketch the whole day. So you're taking the abstract concepts from day 1 and you're making them concrete so that everyone is aligned and thinking about the same things and has the same picture in their head. Well, that's another thing that we did with the decision sprint. We weren't sketching designs. We were actually, on the second day, starting to design the sort of back-end data structure that would kind of support the system that we were talking about. And we were doing that on a whiteboard on wheels and kind of, taking it to a room. And then when we would go in for our meetings, we'd wheel it in there and kind of look at like, okay, this is where we are now. Does this make sense? Getting that collective scrutiny, but it was around something that was very concrete, right? It wasn't just this abstract thinking, because we needed alignment in order to move quickly. So getting concrete quick is an important element as well. Ensure collective scrutiny. We've talked about this several times now. I haven't worked on a problem that wasn't, we didn't come up with a better solution by involving a few more people. And so just making sure that you're, kind of involving the people that, the right people, and allowing and encouraging people to actually kind of scrutinize the ideas and make it better. Time box decision. This isn't a new concept. It's something that's been used for quite a long time, but it's a really effective tool within, when you're trying to make fast progress on something. And the design sprint is essentially like a time box that consists of a bunch of other time boxes, right? Monday, you have like these steps that you have to get through that day. And so it's time boxed. And what the time box does is it keeps you focused. It helps make sure that, you're not going to kind of allow a conversation to go on for hours or days or even weeks about something when we just need a decision so that we can move on. So a time box is a really effective tool. And finally, keep it lightweight and nimble. You don't want a process that's kind of bogged down with, too many approvals and too many people involved and, too many steps. Just make sure that you're not over designing the process and making sure that it can stay lightweight and nimble so that so that it allows fast progress. So, thank you. That's all that we have. Experticity is hiring, by the way. If anyone's interested, definitely come up and talk to us about it. If anyone has any questions or any lessons that they've learned from design sprints, kind of open it up. Yeah.
How did you get the stakeholders' time? How did you get that much time from all those stakeholders? Was that difficult?
I pretty much handled the scheduling, and I pitched it as like kind of put it on them. Like you've had a lot of ideas. You've come down a bunch of times to product and talked about them. This is really an opportunity for you and people from your team to come down and talk to us about it. And they were pretty eager to participate. I don't think we had anyone say no.
Yeah, and we've had so a lot of different stakeholders from around the company in those initial interviews on Monday. We've also, like that first sprint, it was just members of our team, but after that, we've involved people from marketing. We had the creative director for the company hang out with us for a week and work on design sprints. We had the VP of strategy, I think at the time, come and do one of these with us as well. And we have not like talked to one person that's like, I don't want to do that. So people are generally really excited to be able to participate and have their opinion sort of heard and count in the process. So
it was interesting as well. Like after we had John, the designer, join us at the end of the sprint. So we didn't answer our question the second sprint, but like I said, we learned a lot of things about other stuff. And John literally ran out of the room at the end of the testing session, like excited to go and do something about what he had learned, like right then and there. It was awesome. So yeah.
Kind of along those lines, I wanted to know how much prep time goes into getting ready for a design sprint. I mean, it seems like you'd have to get the scheduling for the stakeholders. You have to make sure that you know your message or your question. You have to prepare that diagram. How much time into this? And then kind of as a follow-up, how often are you doing it? Is it like for big things or is it for everything?
Mm-hmm. So we try and do about one of these a quarter. So, every 3 months or so. Oh, haha. I need to repeat the question. So the question is, how much time goes into preparing for one of these ahead of time, and how often are we doing them? So we do them about once a quarter. So we've done 3 of them now, and we're talking about what the next one will be. So it is primarily for testing big ideas. I don't know that it's the right process for just kind of like testing smaller features and that sort of thing. It's also not necessarily the best process for testing stuff that's like years out, like really big ideas. That stuff tends to remain a little bit more in the abstract, although I think there's certainly value in, getting insights through, could be a design sprint, but that's probably a piece of a larger process.
The time spent ahead of time, I probably spent like 6 or 7 hours wrangling all the stakeholders and just scheduling things. And, if they had something that was overlapping, I would go and talk to them and explain what we're doing. And often that was like, okay, that sounds really important. I'll move what I'm doing. The diagram and the goal, we probably spend 2 or 3 days talking about that.
Not like full days.
Not full days, but we'll do like meetings we'll write the goal up. We'll talk about it for a couple hours, and then we'll get away from it for a little bit. And then we'll go in and like, is this still the right goal? We'll bring people in like Jeremy, VP of product, or Mark, group product manager, to say, does this feel right? Are
we focusing on the right thing here? Does this feel like the right important question to be focusing on this quarter?
Yep. And sometimes that will work out. Sometimes it won't. The day before our sprint started, I think Jeremy blew up our goal, our question. It was like, is this really the right? So it made us think pretty hard about, much harder about the goal and the diagram we were digging into.
Yeah, but it's about 4 to 6 hours roughly, just kind of doing that thinking and, starting the diagram, which is essentially acting as a starting point for the conversations that you have on Monday, because it's going to change throughout the day.
It's something you've been thinking about for a long time anyway. It's like the profile design. We knew we had to do that for months and months, and then this is just the right process to tackle it. So
the other thing you may need to spend time on is planning for your recruiting for user testing. We haven't done that. We've just kind of done that throughout the week, which adds more stuff throughout the week that you need to do. And we've kind of wanted to wait until we knew what question we were answering to make sure we got the right audience in. But if you need to, for example, talk with your email marketing team about sending an invitation email out to customers or whatever, that's something you might need to take care of ahead of time or set up ahead of time. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, what tools are helpful to have available, kind of during the process? Sticky notes for sure, paper, pens. There's a lot of kind of sketching, And a lot of this just happens like pretty raw, like, you know, just on paper and pen and whiteboard and dry erase markers. Really are like pretty much the main tools outside of building the prototype. You have to have, we've always involved one front-end engineer and then one either full stack or back-end engineer, and they participate for the full week. We think that's a super valuable thing to have, you know, the engineers kind of able to, you know, understand like where we're going and why, and also, you know, kind of push back on ideas that we have and that sort of thing. And so somebody that has the skills needed to kind of build a prototype is obviously another important tool. And there's a lot of different tools that you could use for that. Anything else? Yeah.
What fidelity, when you get to this point where you're showing your customers, what fidelity do you find most effective in getting the concept across? You don't get like bad results, you know, feedback.
Yeah. So my personal philosophy is that the less, oh, sorry, thank you. The question was, what fidelity is appropriate or needed for the prototype in order to get the information that you need out of it? Yeah. So what is our opinion on that? What is our take on that? Yeah, what did we find effective? So the less imagination people have to use, the more accurate the data you're going to get back from them, right? So you can use a wireframe, you know, or something like pretty rough, but if it looks like a wireframe, they're not going to think about it in the same way as they would if it looks real. And so we try to make sure everything looks real. Now, not everything works, right? Like it may just be an image that has a bunch of buttons and things that you could do, but if that's not, if people either don't need to interact with that in order for us to learn what we're trying to learn, or if we can just watch and see if they try to interact with it and then ask, what did you expect to happen? And that's, you know, enough information for us, then that's really kind of the level of fidelity that you know, we shoot for. Does that make sense? If something has to work in order for us to learn what we need to learn, then we make that work, or at least appear to work.
I honestly thought we were going to be sliding pieces of paper with drawings quickly in front of people the first day, because I was 6 months in, I wasn't sure what, you know, if we could do this in a day. And after reading the book, it was, you know, they use one example. There's a robot that they test to deliver toothbrushes to people in a hotel, and it really just sounded like they had this really rudimentary, like souped up Roomba with an iPad on it, and that was enough to validate their idea. So keeping those things in mind is important.
Yeah.
Follow-up question: Envision or Marble Amp?
The question was Envision or Marble Amp. Is that what you? Marble Amp. Okay. That tool I'm not familiar with, so Envision. Yeah. And we actually, because we involved engineers, we actually like built out our prototypes in, you know, like functioning like HTML and that sort of thing. So we haven't used Envision for the design sprint. And sometimes that's been helpful because what they've found is that if you don't have to worry about making something production ready, and you don't have to worry about other engineers coming and like sort of scrutinizing like the way you did stuff, you can actually get a lot done in a day, right? And having a front end and a back end engineer allowed us to kind of tap into some things and make a little bit more robust prototype, in just the day that we had. And we mentioned that the team will be nervous, right? We've built these in, maybe we've had to work an extra hour or something like that to sort of tie things up, but we've never had to stay like late at night or, pull heroics to get a prototype put together. So. How big are the prototypes? So the question is, how big are the prototypes usually? So I'm assuming you're sort of asking about like how many pages and how many sort of actions do we support, like that sort of thing. It depends on the question that we're trying to answer. We've spent more time building one prototype in some of our design sprints, and other times we've kind of built more rudimentary prototypes, but two different prototypes to be able to compare. Typically, We've probably built about, I'd say, 3 to 5 screens worth of prototype to kind of support what it was we needed to test. Our second one was probably the most complicated in that we actually had to store some data and actions about what people had done and kind of change things based on that. And so that was probably the most complicated thing that we had to do, just because there was like logic and kind of involved in storing information. Does that answer your question?
The profile, the first prototype we built was a mobile, like it had a fair amount of logic in it. You could do a number of things. But where we didn't build the logic, we noticed that, and this is something we learned, users were just tapping on some of the icons, and we didn't, really know or think until they did that, oh, like, what are you trying to do there? And we learned a lot actually by not making it super robust. So, yeah.
For your viewing party, you said you interviewed 9 or 10 people. Is the viewing of all of those 10 people using your prototype, or is it one person? How do you consolidate the feedback
Okay.
at the end?
So I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So I think the question is, for the viewing party on the last day, we said that we interviewed like 9 or 10 people during one of the sprints. And do we interview all those people?
At the end.
At the end.
Who plays with your prototype, and who do you present the final findings?
So who plays with the prototype, and who do we present the final findings to? So in terms of like who plays with the prototype, it really depends on what we're trying to learn. But it's always been our members. So we actually recruit members. We have every member on Experticity has to have an account, so we have the ability to contact members, and so we contact people in this area and invite them into the office. We kind of book out a room, and we have 2 rooms, one to run the sessions and the other to sort of broadcast and do the viewing party. And then do you want to talk about like who sits in on the viewing party?
And then we invite the people, the stakeholders we interviewed on Monday, all to go watch. They gave us their input, so they're now going to watch the users go through the things we've built based on their input. And it's, the people who participated in the interview, and then people from their team will come as well, who have strong opinions about, onboarding should work this way, or the profile should look this way. They get to see someone, an actual member using it, and that's pretty powerful. So, and how we capture the feedback is we give all of them Post-it notes and Sharpies, and we divide a whiteboard into all the different test subjects, and they can put their questions and takeaways from the session on the whiteboard. So.
And we've a couple of things we've done on that day as well. Well, number one, like it's not just limited to the people that we interviewed on Monday. Like there's been standing room only, and for some of our sessions, and we let our the people who we're interviewing know like, hey, there's the team that's working on this is watching in another room, and they sort of forget about that after a couple minutes and you just get into the conversation. The second thing is we've made tweaks to the prototype, after we've watched a couple people go through, based on, okay, are we learning what we need to learn? Are people focusing on the right things? Or, hey, what if we tried that? Let's just do that and see, if that changes things. And typically, I think we've brought 5 people in to participate as test subjects on Friday.
What doesn't work well with the process? What is something that you're like, we can still accomplish this, or what is the limitations of doing it?
So the question is, what does not work well for a design sprint? What's not a good fit for a design sprint? So hence the creation of the decision sprint, because it wasn't, the design sprint wasn't quite the right process for that.
So it was just the decision sprint was born out of, there was a little bit of hesitation to do a full-on week design sprint. So we started to think like, all right, yeah, maybe they're right. We don't need to get everyone in a room for 5 days and figure out what the system looks like. That may actually be like too heavy, and we might not be able to make a decision. So we just needed to, like in the organization, like there's some people who move super fast. They want you to like build the stuff now and it needs to get done. And there's other people who are on the other end of the spectrum that kind of like we need to do months of user research before we actually start anything. So the middle ground is like get all those people in a room and listen to everything they're saying, and then just charge forward with you know, hear them out and then just own it. Just you know, clear ownership and autonomy. Just yeah, own the solution, just drive forward. And then I was nervous about that actually. Like there's all those different speeds in the room, and we had to make a decision by Friday, and it worked out. Everyone seemed to be generally happy with what we arrived at.
And I would say, in terms of the sort of problem that might not work so well, like the problem that we did the design or the decision sprint for, was more of like a business logic decision. There was certainly some experience elements involved, but kind of the outcome of those experience elements were not really the critical sticking point. It was more about like, you know, what like role does this play, you know, within the sort of ecosystem, and what are, you know, some considerations, because we've done some things in the past that we learned from. So what are some things that we need to, you know, sort of maintain throughout that? It was a little bit more about sort of gathering the insights that were kind of available within the company and sort of the unique and important, you know, points of view, and leveraging those to inform the sort of creation of what ended up being the output was a data model. So.
And you won't answer, like, the output was the data model, but there were still huge questions. Like the data model or the experience we had designed had implications, all like really large operational implications, from everyone from finance to sales to our marketing team. So those are some of the big questions that were left to answer still, but at least we could charge for it. We knew what we needed to answer, and it wasn't trying to, you know, we need to do this before we do this. We had this, so now we can go. And we're starting to answer some of those bigger questions now.
Question sort of touches on that. How do you avoid bias in the decision maker? And what kind of, like, do you just pick the most clear, level-headed person in the room, or like what's the decision making in that?
I can take this because I blew it on the second design sprint. Yeah, so we had the VP of strategy, and sorry.
And the question was, how do you avoid bias in the decision maker?
So we had a lot of strong personalities in the room, and they were executives in the room. And when everyone's like looking at you and you need to point and say, all right, that's the way we're going, there's a little bit of pressure to make like, oh, that is a huge bet. We should test that. We should, like, this is the bigger risk. Let's do it. It was the wrong decision to do that because we lost focus on the question we were trying to answer. So as much as possible, just that question, if you have that, it's really solid in your goal, just put it everywhere. Just like, and when you have a strong personality in there, like a, you know, VP of strategy or a director, you can always just, it's easy to be the decision maker when you're like, all right, we agreed on that. So, and this doesn't do that. So let's stay focused.
And as the facilitator, you know, I've been the facilitator for the sprints that we've run. Like that's some part of my role is to make sure that we're not veering off track and we're focusing on the right question. One thing one tool that they use in the design sprints to help, like for example, it's like, all right, Joey, you have to make this big decision right now. No pressure. So if Joey's not like feeling super confident about the decision that he's about to make, he can ask for essentially a straw poll, I think is what they call it, where everyone sort of gets a sticky dot and puts their dot next to the idea that they think, or the direction that they think that we should go, just to kind of allow that sort of collective knowledge or consensus to influence. But ultimately, the decision maker can be opinionated. They're the ones that get to make the decision.
He gets 2 sticky dots, and so he can tip the scales. Yeah.
It's totally skewed.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
How much time do you put into the research before you begin on the sprint?
So the question is, how much time do you put into research before you begin the sprint? Like, what do you mean by research? What sort of research are you talking about?
On decisions with the app, in general, you said that you have a question, you go to researchers and ask them to begin researching that, or just cumulatively, how much research goes into this project?
Okay, so the question is cumulatively, how much research goes into the process? So, I mean, we've never done research ahead of time specifically to inform the design sprint. We try to do research on an ongoing basis to help inform, like, the kind of the things that we think are important and the way that we think about the different, pieces of the system that we're working on. But we don't go ahead of time and say, okay, well, before we do the sprint, we have to learn this, because the sprint is actually about learning something that's important to us. And so the sprint acts as the research, essentially, because you have your idea, you make it concrete, you get it in front of people, and you see if it works or not. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Some of the research, like, for example, the stakeholder, the CEO will grab you and literally draw, the solution on the board and in front of you, or someone else will grab you and say, hey, I've got this great idea for the profile. And you just remember those people later when you're doing the stakeholder interviews and bring them in for those. And it's usually pretty good.
All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thanks for the great questions.